Imagine being attacked by two sharks at once. If the thought of one of them biting into you and eating you alive makes you nervous, the diver in this episode experienced exactly what happened to him, which makes it one of the most terrifying shark attack stories ever. It was a tragic man-eating shark attack on Cane Bay. Three guys named Bret Gillian, Rodney Temple, and Robbie McIlvaine were on a scientific excursion on October 14, 1972, to collect materials for a study conducted in Cane Bay on the island of St. Louis. Côte de Saint Victoire. According to Gillian, this region has some of the best wall diving spots in the Eastern Caribbean. Even the disembarkation was simple and did not require a long boat trip. The team's goal was to get some images and follow the traps they had set for the project. The only problem was that their target was on a 210-foot wall next to a steep cliff. Thanks to their collective experience of hundreds of deep dives, the trio didn't worry at all. Ron timed and supervised the dives. To make sure everyone was safe, he recorded dives and tracked the time of ascent. The three of them donned their gear and dived into the water to begin what would become their ill-fated descent of the Cane Bay wall, with Bret and Robbie doing most of the heavy lifting. Arriving at the scene, Bret and Robbie got to work while Ron looked around and assessed the area. Ron saw something truly terrifying. Two white-headed sharks could be seen in the distance. One was slightly longer than the other, measuring 12 feet. A particularly dangerous animal, living mainly in tropical and moderately warm oceans, is the oceanic whitefly shark. The three guys were thrilled to find that they were ahead of schedule after completing the necessary observations, as this meant that they would only need about 20 minutes to decompress and would not have to spend too much time among the sharks during the ascent. I remember thinking how strange it was to see the oceanic white tips right here on the cliff in Cane Bay, Bret said in a subsequent interview. Sometimes shafts and propellers were attacked, as well as steel cables that were lowered from the research vessel. But considering that they didn't seem to pay any attention to them, these two sharks seemed special in some way. Ron stayed behind, and Bret turned and followed Robbie. As expected, he would be the last to rise as a result of their well-planned dive. While they were waiting for Ron to join them, Bret and Robbie met right above the ledge at an altitude of about 175 feet. However, they quickly began to worry as he was running late. Bret was starting to run out of air, so Robbie pointed to his pressure monitor and looked at Bret. Suddenly, Ron's presence became noticeable below thanks to a large bubbling exhaust coming from deeper waters that Rob noticed. Ron must have had some kind of air deficiency, the two of them reasoned, given Bret's lower air consumption. He made the decision to send Robbie upstairs while he went to see if Ron needed any help. But by the time Bret got to Ron, things had gotten as ugly as possible. Without warning, one of the sharks bit him in the left leg, and blood flowed from the cut in scarlet clouds. Bret was shocked and couldn't believe his eyes from what he saw. Ron struggled to tear the 12-foot monster off his leg and prevent further immersion. Bret rushed to his friend's aid, grabbed the strap of his right shoulder harness, and pulled as hard as he could. The second shark viciously bit Ron in the same leg almost at the same time. Ron grimly fought off the attackers, furiously gouging out the shark's eyes and gills in an attempt to fend off the attackers on his comrade. When they were tearing large chunks of flesh from the corpse of his comrade, Bret hit the voracious beast in the torso. The sharks seemed to be in agony as the two guys charged at them. I abruptly released the rod and dived back to a deeper depth, hurrying to get to a safe place. When Bret looked up, he saw Robbie, who was about 100 feet in the air and looking at him in despair. The first shark hit Ron twice in less than 15 seconds, dragging him and Bret along with him off the cliff. Despite the fact that the attack lasted only a minute, Ron lost a significant amount of blood and tissue and is now almost completely limp. Bret was now holding onto the right strap of the rod. When the second shark also returned, when the two of them fell down the wall, the shark bit them and held on. Ron and Bret were quickly slipping away. Ron made futile attempts to swim back out while the sharks continued to slice and bite his defenseless body. The two guys were being pulled deeper and deeper. Bret saw Ron move again to repel another attack, and this gave him great optimism. Bret temporarily grabbed onto the cliff wall when he saw that his comrade was still alive, stopping their rapid fall. Bret saw both sharks circling around their spot when they were suddenly treated again. Bret saw one of the sharks grab the remains of Ron's lower left leg from about 10 feet away. He chewed and tore off the pulp, while the other swallowed it. For the first time since the brutal attack began, Ron, who was only partially aware of what was happening at that moment, looked at his friend. He tried to push Brad away, but Brad shook his head gently and painfully. "I want to keep Bret alive, and at the same time, give him a break to escape." Bree felt his hands burrow into his friend's wounded chest and reached for his waist belt. Unfortunately, there was no longer a harness to grab onto. Ron was crowned. Clutching the fishing rod to his chest, Bret ran to the surface. The sharks immediately pounced on them again. The second shark grabbed Ron by the belly and started shaking him when Ron screamed for the last time. Because of the blood and tissue fragments in the blue water, it turned crimson. Being impoverished, Bret had no power. He was separated from Ron. When Ron's dead body slid into the depths, surrounded by sharks, he stared at it in complete amazement. However, Bret swam as fast as he could to the shore, but saw that his legs were numb. He could barely stand on his feet when he reached the shore. By an amazing coincidence, a couple on their honeymoon accidentally discovered Bret's corpse washed up on the shore. It turned out that the wife was an ambulance nurse who was familiar with the pathophysiology of decompression sickness. The last time Robbie saw Ron and Bret, the sharks carried them over the wall in a stream of blood. He never saw Bret's ascension, so when he got to the beach, he declared that they were both dead. He didn't know Bret had survived until Bret contacted his father from the hospital. A week later, 2 of Ron's friends came to the beach for his memorial ceremony. Robbie saw Ron and Bret. The sharks carried them over the wall in a stream of blood. He never saw Bret's ascension, so when he got to the beach, he declared that they were both dead. He didn't know Bret had survived until Bret contacted his father from the hospital. A week later, 2 of Ron's friends came to the beach for his memorial ceremony.